We are here at launch week 3 wrap up. I'm Bob Tordella. I help manage our sales and marketing at Turbot and evangelize our open source projects. We have Steampipe, Flowpipe, and now we also have Powerpipe, which we'll get into a bit later. With me, we have Nathan, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nathan Wallace. I'm the founder and CEO here at Turbot, and I'm excited to be here again today.
Yeah, and John.
Yeah, I'm John Smith, product architect, kind of work across all the products, but mostly in the pipes products these days.
And so let's just dive into it. I mean, typically we take a step back, take a look at the week. Typically with launch weeks, there's a lot of announcements that have been made across our entire product suite. And so this time around, we started with Turbot Guardrails and announced a number of new capabilities across ServiceNow, new ServiceNow integrations. We introduced some identity features, as well as some very specific AWS features that our customers were asking for. And maybe we'll just we'll start there. One of the features that we announced is a new guardrail policy to automate AWS EBS volume generation types to convert from older generations to newer generations. And this is something that we've identified across many different customers as being an opportunity, and often they were then doing their own remediation, their own controls to remediate them one by one or over time. But recently the feedback had bubbled up to, why can't you guys just do a full remediation guardrail to handle the generation of the volume type, but also the throughput, as well as the forgetting the other,
IOPS.
IOPS. And so Nathan, if you don't mind just talking through, how that guardrail came to be and some of the nuances with it.
Yeah, these are my favorite types of guardrails. This is why I love the cloud, right? Because the whole magic of the cloud is you don't even have to think of it as a physical thing. It's just a virtual thing you can reconfigure. So, we can literally have a customer, when we tell this of millions of dollars by changing their volumes, and they didn't swap any hardware. It's someone else's problem, right? So super great to see that happening. So basically it comes down to the difference between GP2 and GP3 volumes, right? GP3 volumes give you more flexibility with the IOPS, etc. With GP2 used to just provision really large ones to get some with that, and then you might start chaining it, do dedicated IOPS as part of that. GP3 give you higher IOPS to start and then more control over the actual IOPS from there. So we built a control set that actually knows and understands all the mappings between that, at what point the thresholds are worth doing the conversion, and then we'd inspect your existing volumes and automatically configure them. And that can happen, hot while the machines are running. There's no need to change anything, no downtime or anything like that. So that control just goes through and does that according to what the users want. It was amazing watching our customers roll that out and come back and just they just saved, a ton of money by getting that right. So so easy. Just imagine it's all virtual and away they went. So I love those stories. They're great.
And I know we, a while ago when they were first introduced, we actually benefited from it at Turbot for our own implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was good to start enabling that for customers in an automated way. One of the other announcements was around increasing some of our identity management features. So
right.
For those who aren't familiar, Turbot Guardrails actually supports an entire identity management suite. Mm-hmm. And so it not only supports time-based, role-based access controls or RBAC controls, on the product itself, so people can have different roles across the product around different parts of the hierarchy, but also we can then support user management or role-based management in Amazon and Azure and Google. Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole heap of features around that. So we automatically define all roles and different levels of risk and a consistent model across Amazon, Azure, and Google. You can extend those roles for how you see fit. And you can also deploy and bring your own roles mm-hmm. into the product. And so we've had extensive feature set for many years on roles as well as users. But recently, we've had some customers that wanted to extend our user groups a bit further and bring their own in. And so that was nice to kind of see that feature progress forward. I don't know, Nathan, if you had any background to that feature behind the scenes and what the team did there.
Our guardrails model is really clean, right? Basically asking, what level of access do you want to give a person in this area? So it might be AWS admin, right? Or we even do operating system, right? So it could be Linux admin as well, right? So we go through all the levels of your stack there and have standard levels like AWS S3 admin. So you can break it down as S3 rights, or AWS EC2 metadata, right? Or DynamoDB, operator. Like we have standard like services and types you can map everybody to, and it works incredibly well. It's really simple to use, combined with all the timing and stuff that Bob, you mentioned a moment ago. But for some customers, they're just like, I need more flexibility. I want to combine multiple, services at once in a role, or I'm only using roles, etc. Or I want to do the same thing with users and groups, right? A lot of our customers love IAM users. I know that can be a bit strange if you come from security world, but they love them because they work really well with like at scale and with using different buckets and all sorts of things. It's a very flexible model for them, but they want to assign those users to groups and they want control of what those groups are. We automate the groups as well in those standard models I spoke about, but they want to define their own. So they use now like the automatic stack deployments in Guardrails. So they define a Terraform stack and roll that out, or OpenTofu type stack and roll that out across the environment, and set up the roles or the groups they want. Or they can create them by hand, it doesn't matter. And then in Guardrails now in the UI, you can assign those same roles or groups to people with all the same controls about like, automatic timeout, activation, deactivation, so you can grant them to yourselves just when you need them, etc. But you're in control of the actual permissions that are coming out there. So it's very, very flexible model for those who want it, combined with the simpler ones that they often use at scale as well. So yeah, really exciting to have that out there. Gives those those enterprises who are using that for us just so much flexibility and power. It's just so much simpler than the crazy screens with like 400 roles to log into or out of and all that sort of stuff that most people are going with. Once you just lean into that model, across account, across cloud, all that stuff managed in one place, tied back to your SAML, it's just so much easier for end users.
Yeah, and even just from a multi-cloud perspective,
Right.
we've seen like users just have an account picker, but not just to Amazon, but also to Azure, also to
Right,
Google.
exactly.
Yeah, so excited to see more extensions around those features for our enterprises that are using it. And then lastly, on Monday, and when we announced this for Guardrails, we also announced more extended scope and features for our ServiceNow integration. So as some might recall from launch week 2, we first announced Turbot Guardrails' ability to sync all of our cloud CMDB metadata into ServiceNow CMDB, and a continuous sync to do that. So as we capture changes that are happening in Amazon, Azure, and Google, we also then sync that into your ServiceNow CMDB. But this launch week, we actually did a lot more scope and increased our coverage, especially around Azure and Google. So Nathan, if you had any more commentary to add beyond that. Yeah.
Look, I think that's the main point. We basically took that automatic sync of resources in ServiceNow and we expanded it, massively to all the different resource types you might care about. Users, can choose which ones they want, turn them on, turn them off, choose which fields they want within them as well. We know people need control over their ServiceNow, and also the table that it targets as well. And now they can do that for, hundreds of resource types across AWS, Azure, and Google. So very flexible. And it was exciting for us, the reception to, our ServiceNow features from earlier, and people want more resource types. So that's what we're giving them, right? So we look forward to more feedback and keep building from there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the benefits of this type of integration is that it just works out of the box with 100+ different resource types.
Right.
Some of the native integrations are handling a handful. This comes packed with all that out of the box, simple point and click setup, with all the extensibility features that we have to get it nuanced into your CMDB. So real excited for that. Yeah.
We just keep hearing from people how painful this is, right? Like so often now we're talking to a customer and they're like, well, we're trying to do this, but it's been a project running for a year and we're not sure how it's going. It's hard, it's been tough, and it's expensive often as well to do. And we now with these controls, we're literally like, whatever, 5 cents per control, you turn it on, through it comes. And it not only like imports at once, but it keeps it constantly in sync. So your data quality is just radically improved from what people are used to when they're thinking about this sort of ServiceNow sync. It's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. So on Tuesday, we focused that day around Flowpipe, and there's 2 major announcements with Flowpipe. One being the query trigger, and which we'll dive into, as well as the human input. step that we added. Maybe let's first dive into the query trigger, and John, if you want to kind of talk us through, why did that come out now? Why wasn't it maybe up front in the product, or what are the community excited about with using that query trigger versus a time-based trigger?
Sure. So what the query trigger allows you to do is basically write a SQL query and then only have a pipeline run when there's some sort of a change event. At why it wasn't in the first release is just we iterate, right? We build something usable and we get it out there and we get feedback and we move from there. But the query trigger also required some state management that we didn't have in Flowpipe that we had to add as well in order to kind of have a back end for it. But yeah, it simplifies this. Oftentimes you really only are interested in processing the thing that changed, and that is the intent of the query trigger. You don't have to process all the events every time. Flowpipe takes care of managing the state and watching and telling you what things are new or updated or deleted, and it just makes it easier for you to kind of trigger these things as you need them, as opposed to running on a schedule and doing all of that kind of housekeeping work yourself.
It does make it easier. Like, for example, if I was trying to watch my cloud environment, and I was, instead of just doing a constant query that's getting all my IAM users out of Amazon, and then I have to handle, well, what's new in that. This is just the ability to have that same query, do that up front, and then it's just tracking anything that's different against that. And so it's much easier than handle pieces of changes into your next workflow or your next step.
Yeah, it's powerful for any sort of data platform, but it ties really nicely with Steampipe, right? If you're already using Steampipe and you want to use Flowpipe to take action on the things that occur in Steampipe, using the query trigger, it makes it easy for you to just process the things that have happened since the last time it ran.
Right, because I guess for Flowpipe, it's agnostic, nothing to do with Steampipe. It's basically it's unbundled from that. It's its own open source project, and so steps like to call out to an HTTP or steps to call out to a database does not need to be Steampipe related or anything Turbot related. It could be any endpoint.
100%.
But to your point, Steampipe already comes with 140 different data sources that you could tap into under one connection. So that makes it really powerful. And so that's great for, you got kind of time-based steps that you can run. You got the query trigger. And so how you're getting that data into the flow, but then when you're trying to manage it and pipe it to other type of steps, I think that's where the human input one is really interesting, because most folks might have a workflow. It's just like, oh, I grab some data, I then maybe create an incident or maybe Slack it, but you might need to do more with that, and you might need to have a human involved to then maybe ask more questions or take an action. And so maybe talk us through what that human input step is, and maybe some examples, John, for what you could do with it.
Human input is not different than any other kind of piece of input that you need in a pipeline. You need to get information, you wait till it's there, and then you do something. But the difference with the human intervention as opposed to the other one is that there's known delivery channels, right? People send emails, people send Slack, people send MS Teams, those types of things, and often you have to wait for a long period of time, and so in a lot of workflow type systems, you build those through multiple workflows. You kind of have to stitch together. This workflow happens when, and it fires off an event, and then it's done, and then there's maybe another endpoint that fires a different workflow when a thing comes in on the channel that I just sent the message to. And the advantage of the workflow input that we have in Flowpipe is that it's all in the one pipeline. You just ask a question, right? And then it waits for the response. And so you don't have to have a kind of patchwork of different pipelines that you mentally stitch together. They're actually in the same pipeline code, and you can read through, and it's easy to manage, and it's easy to kind of see what the actual flow is. The other thing that's interesting about, well, I think it's interesting about how we handle the inputs is that as a pipeline author, if you're writing Flowpipe like library type mods that you want to share with others, you want to be able to put in a point where you ask for information, but you don't know who to ask or via what mechanism, right? And so with the way that we've implemented the input, there's an abstraction there that allows you to set up multiple what we call integrations. And the integration is the thing that links Flowpipe to a specific platform. So there's a Slack integration to talk to Slack, there's an email integration to talk to your email server, and there's an HTTP kind of, that's our own HTTP endpoint, console endpoint. And then in the step, you say, you know, send it to a notifier, and the notifier sends it to the integration. So the notifier is kind of in between the step that says, this is the question I want to ask, or the message that I want to send, and the integration that says, this is how you interact with the thing to send it to. And it contains the routing information. So a notifier can be a group of places. You can say, send it via email to my email integration, and this is the subject, and this is the to list, who to send it to. Also send it to Slack, and this is the channel for this specific request. So it allows you to kind of decouple the pipeline code about what the workflow is from the actual routing of where to send it and who to send it, and who to approve it, because that information is installation specific. It's not generic in the way that the pipeline code is as well.
To me, what's so exciting about the, you know, this is sort of I genuinely think we've done workflow for DevOps teams. And I think workflow is a real problem for DevOps teams that they perhaps haven't thought about in that way before. What we've learned over the years helping, you know, running it and then at Turbot doing it, etc., is you so often know that something's wrong and you're trying to get someone to fix it. And it's really hard to get them to do that, right? It's hard to coordinate the work. It's hard to send the messages. It's hard to, you know what to do and all that sort of stuff. You have to work out how you bring your humans and your machines together. That's what it requires for this type of automation. You know, sometimes it's, you know, enough to do an instant fix, but there's a lot of times you're nervous about that. Well, that team owns that. They should approve it. They should check it. But I know what I need them to do. And if they're not going to do it, I need to escalate it to someone else, right? Or get an approval. And now with this, you know, with Flowpipe, we've got this system where in really simple HCL, you're literally combining, you know, a step like, okay, query using Steampipe to find these things that are wrong, send it around, right? You know, assess them, send out an approval for what you want to do, routing it to the different people in that channel. Once they've given an answer, either send it to someone else for something else, or you know, take the action right now by running a container or running a function, and then the pipeline's finished. And there is no other workflow tool on the market that I have found, or that we've found, that's why we built this, that coordinates those things in that way. They're all like, okay, here's my JavaScript code, or here's my point and click thing. And those are great. They're good things that solve real problems for people for sure. But when you're a DevOps engineer trying to work out, how do I combine this script with that human approval, with that event there, etc., that's a really hard problem that's not well connected. And Flowpipe gives it to you all as code, combined in a single place, you know, composable with the mods, etc. And I think that solves a real gap in the market, a real gap for people trying to solve this problem, you know, just doing their job at work. It's hard to do without it. I don't know how I'd solve these problems without Flowpipe. I'd end up with like crazy Python systems and like web forms, and now I'm becoming an engineer through all levels of the stack. And with Flowpipe, it's just like literally, you know, 50 lines of HCL maybe. It's so simple.
One of the biggest problems in automated remediation, just automation in general in the DevOps world, is a lack of trust of people that the system's going to do what you expect it to do. Yeah. And the human input it gives you an ability to earn the trust. You can ask first, you can ask for approval, you can filter the list. And after some period of time, maybe you don't even need it anymore and you can drop it. But one of the hardest things in reality, in the real world, for getting your system automated is that a lot of people don't trust the system, or they have too many caveats. I want to do that well, but if this is the case, then we can't do it, and if this is the case, we can't do it. And you know, this manual intervention, this one little step in here to be able to prompt for clarifying information or approval, helps build trust in the system.
You know, Nathan, to your point, it's, you know, really workflow for DevOps. I mean, not only from a tech stack and composability and even the language itself being very familiar, being HCL. You know, now it's really connecting the data, but also systems, and now the people. Excited to see what the community builds with it. So that brings us to the next day. In really huge news, we came out with another open source project. So last launch week, we introduced Flowpipe, and just in a few months, we now have announced Powerpipe. And so Powerpipe, has a lot of great features on itself. I mean, it is dashboards for DevOps, right? So Flowpipe being workflow for DevOps, this is more of the visualization layer or the reporting layer on your data. And so for those familiar, a lot of these type of features were actually in Steampipe as Steampipe mods. And a lot of those have now been ported over into Powerpipe in its own standalone project. And so Nathan, if you want to just take us through what are some of the core capabilities of Powerpipe? And then you can maybe dive into, what was the lineage with Steampipe mods and why it's branched out.
Yeah, so I mean, Powerpipe really has a couple of key features, and the thing we've focused on again is how do we do great dashboards for those DevOps teams? And there's lots of dashboarding tools out there, and they're great. We all know them, hate them, love them, use them, whatever it might be. But they're out there, but they're just not optimized for the use cases that we see our users needing, right? And so some of the things they need is I want to view, basic reports or dashboards or information about my, the state of my resources. How many EC2 instances do I have? Just give me a list of them. The number of times we see people buying these ridiculous tools just to get a list of EC2 instances, right, is kind of crazy. So basically it's like, yeah, you can do that in Powerpipe, see a list of them, download this as a CSV, just use it or snapshot that view. We have all the cards and stuff built in there so you can do a nice count and things like that. Simple tools, to do those sorts of things. Again, written HCL, composable as code, because that's just how we roll in our DevOps world. Now, the next thing you often want to do as a DevOps team is write reports to check if things are the way you expect them to be. Benchmarks, right? CIS, even your own custom ones, NIST, all that sort of stuff. Now, with Steampipe, we've had those mods for a while. They're now Powerpipe mods from our point of view, right? And so a benchmark is really just hundreds and hundreds of checks organized into a way that basically says, this is okay, this is an alarm, this is an alert. Try doing that with your average dashboarding tool, right? Your average BI tool. There's no concept of that. There's no organization for that. That is built in as a key concept to Powerpipe and works incredibly well. The third thing, right, of the dashboards, then the benchmarks, it's these visualizations. How do I know what my resources are and how they're connected to each other? How can I see my EC2 instance in the context of its network with its security groups and the other things, and discover what's out there in my environment? So those relationship diagrams or ability to visualize your infrastructure is like another key aspect of what a dashboard for DevOps looks like. And that's what Powerpipe delivers. Now, as you mentioned, Steampipe had a number of those features and they've been brought over to Powerpipe now. But we've added some new features in Powerpipe that are really exciting for that. The next thing we added was the ability to say, Steampipe dashboards always just spoke to the Steampipe database, which is Postgres, so it was kind of flexible, but it wasn't really designed for it. It would rarely work with Steampipe. In Powerpipe, it's like literally use your data source, right? Postgres, MySQL, Steampipe, DuckDB, SQLite, any of those databases are now available for you to build these dashboards. And we see these teams with lots of data in different systems, for tracking what they're doing. They can now just start to query those. Of course, it works great with Steampipe. So you can query all the 140 sources, beyond that, just using that connector. But that's a lot of flexibility for talking to different systems to build the dashboard you want. The next big feature we really brought in now was the ability to really extend those benchmarks with filtering and grouping. We've been asked this a lot. How can I just see my alarms? Well, now you can. You filter and group, get your results, and just look at the alarms. How can I organize these CIS results by account? Well, now you can. You just add a dimension for that account. How can I limit what's in there? Now you can. And all of that is just beautiful, pivoting, simple in the UI, instant to do over the result sets. That works with the live data or with snapshot data, right? So it's very flexible for that. And when you snapshot those, they're saved in that format, so the next person opens it, sees the view you wanted them to see and expected them to see. But they still have the data below it, so they can slice and dice further from that if they want to. It's self-contained, that snapshot, to move forward that way. So that's really exciting for people who use the benchmarks a lot or are used to those. It's a game-changing capability when you use those tools. I actually remember when it was first demoed internally and Bob's jaw was on the floor and he's like, wait, is that real or was that like a fake? It was like, it was a really fun moment.
It was so smooth. but
That's
the guy who was demoing it was just so nonchalant about such a big impact. So I was more floored on his take on it.
But there's
So
one more thing I wanted to mention, Bob,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is search path filtering. So this is massive. Like people have been asked about this a lot. So, when you're using Steampipe and you have a lot of connections, right? Maybe an aggregator with 50 Amazon accounts in it. That's a lot of stuff to see on a CIS report. And so people have asked in the dashboards, how can I see what just for one account at a time? That's now available in the UI. That was never available before in Steampipe. You had to restart the server with your search path and other things. Now in Powerpipe, you just pull that thing up and you can choose from the drop down at the top which account you want to look at, which connection you want to use, right, to build those and view those dashboards. So that's a massive, win and time saver for a lot of our users. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, because in the past they had to basically open up the mod and create custom controls or custom dimensions for that in order to get that information out. So much more flexible to, yeah. With that, I mean, we often talk about, how Steampipe or other open source projects have these batteries included. And so, a lot of these are mods that came from Steampipe, about, Amazon and Azure, Google, GitHub around security and FinOps and tagging and, a bunch of different use cases spanning across those modules. But that's from a Steampipe perspective as the data source. But with this release, we also came out with a number of new example mods, and a lot of them with some interesting data types that are a lot of fun. I don't know if I know one of them is particular to you around Formula One, but maybe you want to talk about some of the new mods that were introduced to cover the different data source engines.
Yeah, look, we really just wanted to give people a great set of examples. That's what we love to do about how to build these. So we've brought out mods that work with, like I said, DuckDB, SQLite, MySQL, etc., by finding online data sources. So there's a cool one for Formula One. So I enjoyed that a lot. And then there's, like NBA or like other things like that out there. So if you search, look in the mod list, you can find those different ones under the insights section and, play with some different sorts of data sets and see what's possible. These are, beautiful dashboards. They're not designed to be the highest fidelity dashboard system you've ever got. That's not our task for a dashboard for DevOps system, right? What we're trying to do is just give you really simple controls to build beautiful, like to the point dashboards with the charts you need, the counts you need, the data you need, right? So we're trying to highlight how that's possible.
And similar to Flowpipe, kind of being in this middle, it's not it's kind of like high code coding from scratch with no reusability of any libraries or modules, and it's not this high end tool that's point and click like some type of SaaS solution for workflow. Similarly with Powerpipe, it kind of sits in that middle, right? Because what are your alternatives to do this from scratch or to do this with an expensive BI tool? This seems to fit well in that middle for DevOps resources. And you touched upon this and I teed up the question, but I want to hear from John's perspective. Part of this is that, these features, well, some of these features were already in Steampipe, where not only can you query, but you can also then run the benchmarks or the dashboards, and that was baked into the same CLI. And so now this is now becoming its own open source project. And so maybe if you can go in some background, John, about why we're unbundling or refactoring out Steampipe to be specific and Powerpipe to be its own thing.
Yeah, because it's time. The original vision when we started kind of envisioning what Steampipe would be included the Steampipe database function, the stuff that's currently already in Steampipe and will remain in Steampipe, as well as the visualization and dashboarding component, which is now Powerpipe, as well as the kind of ability to take action, which has kind of evolved into Flowpipe. And we first released Steampipe and it was just the database. And then when it came time to add the next piece, which was visualization, it actually started with the control running in batch before it even got to the dashboard. Even then we were discussing, is this a separate product or is it the same product? And at the time, the decision was that we wanted to keep it together because the dashboards we were going to build were going to be Steampipe dashboards anyways. The first one only worked with a Steampipe database, although it was pretty soon that we added support for Postgres generically, just people didn't realize that it was there. And it was the right decision at the time because what we wanted to do was expose it to people and get people using it. And the best way to show you what it could do was to have a very kind of opinionated set of things that do that, which is mods that worked with Steampipe. They work together really well. When we started building Flowpipe, the discussion came up again. Are we just going to build this in? And, you know, the approach of building everything into one tool is limiting for a few reasons. First of all, the kind of Unix way is one tool does one job and you can mix and match tools. And in the DevOps world, that's what we do. I mean, and in fact, that's why our tools are good. It's because they help you stitch together all of those various tools that you use. So why should ours be any different, right? And so even when we built it, even though Steampipe and Powerpipe were one thing, it was just Steampipe, we tried to build it in such a way that it was already composable. And even before Powerpipe, like I said, you could use any PostgreSQL and backend and it would work. And all the visualization stuff has been kind of decoupled. Once we're going to add Flowpipe, it was definitely, it's time to kind of separate these products. And by separating them, I mean, there's several advantages. One, you can plug in the piece that you want. There's clean interfaces between them. Like I said, we try to keep the interfaces clean all along, but they're forced to be clean interfaces. These are things that are separately on separate tracks, built separately, versioned separately, released on their own schedule. And so it forces those interfaces to be clean. It also provides more visibility to folks about what the capabilities of the products are individually. The more you lump in the product, the harder it is to explain what the thing is or what the thing does or why you would use it. And this separation lets you see that you can use just the visualization piece against any backend. And there are advantages just to the visualization piece. They're strong together, there's no doubt. And historically, since most of the mods were written for Steampipe, they still are going to work great together. But we're hoping people see possibilities that they didn't see before once we uncouple them. Third, we're going to add more products. We're going to continue to develop more and more tools. And we want each one of those tools to be awesome on its own and all the tools to be awesome together. And separating them makes it possible to be able to build them in such a way that they work that way, and makes it possible that for the community to pick up the tool that they want and use it the way that they want to use it. And so some of the features and some of the things that we release in these tools, for Powerpipe is a great example, right? We put some demo mods and sample mods about how you can interface with other backends. We don't currently have anything in our backlog to build mods against non-Steampipe stuff, but I hope somebody else does, right? That capability is there for the community to pick up and run with. And the great thing about working in the open source community is that if you put a tool out there, somebody can use it to do something you didn't expect. And the more separation there is between the tool, I think the more we get, I say we, meaning not just us, Turbot, the company, but everybody that uses the tool, the more we get the benefit of people's creative use of the tool. And I think that, separating the Powerpipe and Steampipe and Flowpipe together clarifies what the purpose of each is, the original intended purpose, and allows them to develop on their own in a way that makes them more useful, both together and apart.
I think, just from my perspective on constantly talking to the community members or, others about the products, it's much easier to talk about, right? Because like you said, it's doing one thing really well. So simplifying that message, simplifying the product makes it easier for people to grok and start using. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for its opportunity to grow beyond just what was in Steampipe, which was already large as a scope for data sets and sources. But this can take a life of its own, supporting any database backend. So, excited that it's coming out as its own project. And yes, it does work well across, but excited to see where it ends up in the community.
It gives Steampipe itself a little more freedom too. It's when you're trying to be both a database and the visualization of that database, you start to look like a tightly constrained, tied tool. And that is not what Steampipe is, especially with all the work we did with, the zero ETL stuff to bring out, all the Postgres FDWs, all the SQLite extensions and everything for Steampipe. It's, really, the leading zero ETL engine at this point for querying your live data across all those different platform sets. And you want that to be focused on the database tier and the data tier, and it complicates it when you start bringing in the mods and all that sort of stuff to that as well. They're incredible and great, and they add a lot of value, particularly if you're focused on, I just want to run a CIS report, and we're conscious of that and discussed, and debated that a lot for those users who really want them fairly tightly coupled. But overall, this allows Steampipe to really run and be free for those who really focus on it for querying, which is a lot of people in the community. And then for those who want more, flexibility and freedom on the dashboarding tier, they've now got that, but they still work, great together. But I think it's important to give Steampipe that clarity and that freedom to become that zero ETL tool it wants to be and needs to be on its own.
On Thursday, that day was focused on Turbot Pipes, and excitingly, we got Powerpipe introduced into Pipes almost day one of Powerpipe being announced, which is great. And so, I think a lot of that came from we wanted to really get in some of the new functionality that the community has been asking for around search path and filtering and grouping, and really works well with some of the collaboration features we have. So Nathan, why don't you just walk us through what are some of the main new features that are now introduced in Turbot Pipes, and what are we expecting from the folks using it?
Yeah, look, I think I probably spoke about them as part of Powerpipe before. Could have held it for here really, but it's the same thing. So being able to do that search path is really important in Pipes because it is a UI interface, right? You're not restarting the database and all that sort of stuff. So that's a massive win for our Pipes users to have more flexibility for viewing that data and using it. Of course, it all works seamlessly and beautifully with the data tank, for really fast reports and querying across the entire massive data sets that people are running in Pipes at this point. So that's exciting. The filtering and grouping, typically people come to Pipes once they're like starting to run more and more accounts. Like some people come when they're small because they just want the ease of use of having it and the features it brings. Others are bringing in enterprise, our enterprise tier with the customers in there. They're like hundreds of accounts in there, etc. And at that scale, that filtering and grouping is like so important, right? It gives them so much better information, so much more usability to that. I can't wait to hear their feedback as they really play with it there. So for those types of users, these features in Pipes is just a massive win. So that's exciting, and for anyone who wants to try it out, you should give it a shot because it makes it way easier to do that stuff than trying to do it yourself. And once you combine that, of course, with the scheduled snaps and all that sort of stuff, it just keeps compounding for better and better value for the exact data you want to send out to the people in your organization. Right?
Yeah, like some of those is just really powerful on even just the reformatting of the whole benchmark and flipping it. So today, just like think of it like an Amazon CIS benchmark, it's focused on the control hierarchy. But if you wanted to flip that and say, just show me that per account, or show me that per alarm status. It's easy to just pivot and move that whole group by and ordering of those in the hierarchy.
Show me just really alarms by resource. Like it's amazing what you can do with that thing now.
And how quick it is. The
analysis, you can use it for real analysis interactively in a way that you couldn't before. And to Nathan's point, that's important for everybody, but it's more important to larger customers, and our Pipes customers tend to have more. Part of the reason they go there is there's more accounts. Things like Data Tank allow you to manage these things, and so those features are even that much more valuable. And we call it grouping and filtering, but that includes the aggregation and summarization, right? Like, so you have this nested hierarchy, and it's not just that they're grouped that way. You can see real quick, oh wow, this account has way more red than this one does, because it does all of the aggregation for the groupings that you do. So it really is very useful for ad hoc investigation of the thing, as well as for, to Nathan's point, if your view is a per account view because your teams are per account, switch the view, send the snapshot, and they get it in that view. So it really lets you see the data the way you want to see it.
Yeah, and I like that flow of working with that data, getting to the right view you're looking for, and then right on the same screen you can say, you know what, I want to save this, so I want to snap it right away and get the point in time of it. but then it's like, you know, I like this view. I want to schedule it to keep going. And then also then ship it out to my team and notify them. I mean, it's all right at your fingertips. It's a continuation of your exploration to then get it into your team's hands.
Right.
So that's exciting to have all that kind of packed together in Pipes.
Totally.
It was an awesome launch week 3. I mean, it was a ton of stuff around guardrails, really coming out strong with 4 major announcements, and then, you know, hitting out Flowpipe, and then Powerpipe being announced. And then also with Turbot Pipes, including Powerpipe right away. Just again, another awesome launch week. So proud to be working with both of you and the rest of the team. And so any final thoughts or anything before we end the call? Go get the next one. Ready for launch week 4?
You know me. That's what
we're already working on
it. That we're deep in that.
Already on 5 and 6. Yeah.
Well, I'm just so incredibly proud of what we've been able to do, the pace that we're moving, the things we're producing, the quality the work's coming out with, and, you know, the way we're able to keep building on what, you know, our community is asking for and seeing and innovating that forward. I'm so excited, and you know, I'm excited for what's coming next as well. But like, when I looked back at the week here and went, holy cow, that is a lot of stuff done really well. And you know, the hub sites, you know, for those, you know, a bit of the behind the scenes stuff, like working on those hub sites to get them up with all the documentation done, you know, end to end, all of those different examples carried through. It's a massive amount of work we've done. And there's a whole heap of things we're not, you know, we're just quietly improving behind the scenes in Pipes as well, and in guardrails that we're just not even mentioning today, which I could prattle about for hours. So it's yeah, I'm just so proud. It's great.
Yeah, and you know, this is the beginning, not the end, right? Like, we've wrapped a bunch of work, but this is, now we see where it goes. Like, we you know, I'm always interested in seeing where the community takes it, what people like and what people don't like, and we, you know, we need people to use it and give us feedback. And you know, it's exciting today, but it's exciting because of where it's going, not where it is.
Yeah, we love it so much when those messages come in the Slack channels for like, you know, I was poking around trying to do this in Flowpipe, or I like you've done this, and you know, what can I do with Powerpipe? I've got this crazy idea. We love that. Bring it on.
Yeah,
all right,
100%. Well, that's a wrap, and look forward to launch week 4.